There's a phrase most women have either said or heard someone say. You ain't gotta like me, but you will respect me. And it sounds right. It sounds like authority. It sounds like someone who has decided they're done being handled. But here's what that phrase gets wrong. Respect is not something you declare. You cannot assert your way into it. You cannot demand your way to it. You cannot perform your way toward it. Because the women who actually have it, who move through rooms and relationships where their authority is simply understood, they're not the ones declaring respect. They're the ones who stop doing something. They stop needing to be liked more than they needed to be accurate. They stop accommodating behavior that hadn't earned accommodation. They stop absorbing the cost of someone else's disrespect. And once they stopped, respect wasn't something they had to ask for. It was the only thing left. Because you don't build respect, you don't demand it. You stop subsidizing disrespect. And once the subsidy ends, the dynamic has no choice but to reorganize around your authority. The need for respect doesn't show up everywhere. You don't question your authority in rooms where your position is already assumed. You don't over-explain your decisions to people who have never questioned your competence. You don't find yourself absorbing disrespect from people who have no access to anything you need from them. You experience it selectively. At work, with the person whose opinions feel tied to your visibility. In family, with the person whose approval you were conditioned to need. In relationships, with the person whose perception of you you've been quietly managing since the beginning. In business, with the person whose title made you treat their disorganization as your responsibility to fix. It's not everywhere. It's specific environments, specific dynamics, specific people. And what every single one of those environments has in common is that somewhere along the way you made it frictionless for them to treat you without authority. You removed the cost. You absorbed the friction. You accommodated the behavior until disrespect became the path of least resistance. And that's not a character flaw, that's a pattern. One that ends the moment you understand what's actually been running it. Respect is not something people give you because you've earned it. It's not something that comes from being competent enough or agreeable enough or present enough. Respect is what remains in a dynamic once disrespect becomes too costly to continue. That's it. That's the entire mechanism. Here's the scene. Someone in your life oversteps. Maybe it's a demand that assumes your availability. Maybe it's a tone that assumes your compliance. Maybe it's behavior that assumes there will be no friction on the other side of it. And instead of letting it sit, you move. You explain yourself. You justify your position. You soften the moment. You absorb the discomfort so the interaction stays smooth. You say, I'm fine, I'll handle it. I didn't mean for it to come across that way. I just want us to be okay. Let me figure something out. And the overstep cost them nothing. No friction, no consequence, no recalibration. So it happens again, not because they're a bad person necessarily, but because you made it frictionless. And frictionless paths get used every time. Stop asking, why don't people respect me? Start asking, what have I been absorbing that should have had a cost? That's where your authority has been going. This didn't develop overnight. You learned through repetition that keeping things smooth was safer than letting them be uncomfortable. That absorbing friction was more manageable than the consequence of not absorbing it. Think about a road surface. When a road has traction, when there's friction between the tire and the ground, the vehicle stays in its lane. Speed is controlled, direction is maintained. The driver has to be intentional about every movement. Now remove the friction, ice the road, and suddenly what took effort before takes none at all. The vehicle drifts, movements become careless. There's no resistance telling the driver to recalibrate. That's what accommodation does to a dynamic. Every time you absorb the overstep, you ice the road. Every time you explain yourself when you didn't owe an explanation, you ice the road. Every time you made disrespect comfortable and costless, you iced the road. And the person moving through that dynamic wasn't malicious necessarily. They were just responding to the absence of friction, the way every moving object does. They went where there was no resistance. You didn't make them disrespectful, but you made disrespect frictionless. And that's the part only you can change. Ask yourself directly, who benefits when you absorb friction that should belong to someone else? The person at work who consistently drops responsibility in your direction, they benefit. Your accommodation covers their gap. Their authority stays intact because yours absorbed the cost. The family member whose behavior everyone else adjusts around, they benefit. Your smoothing keeps the dynamic invisible. Nothing has to change because you've been managing the temperature. The business relationship where disorganization somehow became your problem to solve, they benefit. You find the forms they should have sent. You absorb the friction of their oversight, and they collect the income your effort produced. The partner whose entitlement had no resistance, they benefit. The access continues. The behavior repeats because the road stayed icy every time it should have had traction. Every time you subsidized disrespect, someone kept access they hadn't earned. Someone avoided a recalibration they needed. Someone's behavior went unexamined because you absorbed what should have been their consequence. And the need to be liked, the need to be seen as reasonable and easy and good, that's what funded the subsidy. Not weakness, the need for a specific perception. And that need is exactly what disrespect has always been running on. Here's what most women don't realize. You've been the one keeping disrespect affordable, not because you're passive, but because every time you absorb friction that wasn't yours to carry, you removed the cost that would have forced a recalibration. Every time you over-explained a decision that didn't require explanation, you handed your authority to someone who hadn't asked for permission. Every time you accommodated behavior you knew was an overstep, you signaled that the overstep had no real boundary. Every time you kept the peace by absorbing what should have disrupted it, you made disrespect the path of least resistance. You thought you were being the bigger person. What you were actually doing was maintaining a dynamic by making it too comfortable to change. Here's what most people misunderstand. They think the discomfort of withdrawing accommodation belongs to them. That the friction they feel when they stop absorbing is evidence that they went too far. But that discomfort doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the dynamic. The one that only functioned because you kept the road icy. The moment you let the friction return, the moment disrespect has an actual cost, the dynamic cannot continue as it was. Because it was never built on their authority. It was built on your subsidy. Ask yourself this. Where in your life have you been absorbing friction that should belong to someone else? Not everywhere, just in specific rooms, with specific people. Where has your accommodation been making disrespect too comfortable to stop? That's not your personality. That's a subsidy. And subsidies can end. Here's what happens when a subsidy ends. And I'm telling you now so you recognize it when it comes. They'll say you changed. They'll say you're being difficult. They'll say you used to be so easy to be around. They'll call you cold. They'll call you distant. They'll suggest something is wrong with you for no longer absorbing what you used to absorb. Not because your behavior became unreasonable, because friction returned to a path that had none. When you stop subsidizing disrespect, the people who relied on frictionless access will try to re-ice the road. They'll apply pressure. They'll appeal to the version of you that kept things smooth. They'll frame your authority as a problem. They'll manufacture urgency designed to pull you back into accommodation. That's not feedback. That's a dynamic trying to restore the conditions it was built on. And recognizing it is what keeps you from reabsorbing what you just stopped carrying. Because the discomfort of their adjustment is not your discomfort to manage. It's the friction that should have existed all along. Respect returns when accommodation stops, not through confrontation, not through speeches, not through announcing that you're done, through one thing: letting disrespect have a cost in real time. Here's what it sounds like in real time. Someone calls with an entitlement disguised as a request. O response: okay, let me see what I can do. I don't want this to become a whole thing. I'll just handle it. New response: don't call me with that. And you end the call. Someone questions your position after the facts have already been presented. O response: I understand your concern. Let me try to explain it differently. I'm not trying to cause any issues here. New response: my position stands. If there is a specific error in what I presented, let me know. Someone assumes your availability for something that isn't your responsibility. O response: I guess I can figure something out. I guess I need to rearrange a few things. It's fine. New response: that's not something I'm available for. Full stop. Full stop. The shift isn't in the volume, it's in the absence of over explanation. Because authority doesn't justify itself, it simply stops absorbing. Here's the distinction most people never reach. You've been asking, how do I make people respect me? But that question already has the wrong architecture. It positions respect as something you have to make happen, something you produce, something you earn through the right combination of behavior and presence and performance. But respect was never built. Every dynamic you ever been in where respect was simply present, where your authority was simply understood, you weren't performing anything, you weren't managing a perception, you were simply not subsidizing its absence. Respect isn't something you build. It isn't something you demand. It's what's left when you stop making disrespect affordable. The moment accommodation ends, the moment friction returns, the moment disrespect has an actual cost in real time, respect doesn't have to be negotiated. It becomes the only available dynamic. Not because you became harder, not because you became louder, because you stopped funding the alternative. Now you have a choice. You can keep absorbing friction that doesn't belong to you, keep the road ice, keep the subsidy running, and keep asking why respect never seems to arrive. Or you can recognize that every accommodation you extend to behavior that hasn't earned it is a direct withdrawal from your authority, and stop. One keeps the dynamic intact. The other makes respect the only thing left standing. Quietly, cleanly, permanently. This channel isn't about becoming someone different. It's about understanding the dynamics that have been running on your subsidy and learning exactly when to stop paying. If you're done funding disrespect with accommodation it never deserved, subscribe. You're exactly where you're supposed to be.